Welcome back to Brave Ideas, where we chat with the leaders in commercial real estate to answer all questions space as a service and help office real estate reposition to meet the evolving demand from the future of work. If you're an investor, fund manager, developer, landlord, operator, property manager, agent, or broker, hit that subscribe button. And if you prefer to watch this episode or join the newsletter, head over to braveideas.media. I'm your host, Caleb Parker, and I want to give a big thank you to the team at WorkLife for their brilliant podcast studio and hospitality for this episode. If you've been thinking about launching your own podcast, I highly recommend getting in touch with them, and we'll include a link to their podcast studio in the show notes below. My guest for this episode is my friend Joe Mapp, commercial director at Wizu and Flexico, the multi-brand flex platform that's growing fast across the UK. Joining me as co-host for this episode all season long is Eyal Lasker, CEO of FlexSpace AI, our headline sponsor this season. Now, Joe brings a deep commercial perspective to this conversation. She spent years inside the flex office sector, including more than a decade at NewFlex, where we cross paths. And today, she's helping lead the next phase of growth at Wizu and Flexico as the business expands its footprint and sharpens its multi-brand strategy to serve different types of landlord opportunities and customer demand. In this episode, we get into the practical realities of what actually makes flex work, from how to think about pricing power, retention, and revenue quality, to why smaller, more diversified office suites can often create a more resilient business than chasing one big customer. We also talk about how landlords and operators should think about building layout, why some buildings are simply not the right fit for flex, how the managed product is changing the competitive landscape, and why retention remains one of the most important drivers of long-term profitability. Joe also shares how Wizu thinks about community, customer experience, website conversion, and the commercial metrics that matter most, from lead flow and viewing conversion to churn, meeting room utilization, and break-even occupancy. We get details in this one. Before we jump into the full conversation with Joe, here's a quick word for our headline sponsor, FlexSpace AI. If you're a flex operator still juggling spreadsheets and manual rate sheets, stop. You don't need to be a wizard to outsmart the big guys. You just need FlexSpace AI. It's your AI-powered revenue team that never sleeps, optimizing prices, automating marketing, and filling your space while you focus on your members. No burnout, no guesswork, no what-if tabs at 2 a.m. With FlexSpace AI, your building works as smart as you do. Now head over to flexspace.ai/brave and start growing your revenue today. Now, without further ado, let's jump in to this episode with Joe. Welcome to Brave Ideas, Joe.
Thank you very much, Caleb.
It's so good to be sitting here in the WorkLife podcast studio in Farringdon with my co-host, Eyal.
Hello.
Hello, sir. And Joe, we've had many of chats offline, off a podcast, because we had our careers overlap for a couple years.
Years, yeah.
And now you're with Wizu.
Yep.
And Flexico, multi-brand company, as commercial director. Give us a little bit of, for people who don't know the Wizu brand and the company, give us just a quick little backstory.
Okay. So, yeah, Wizu was founded in 2016. Our founders are still very much involved in the business, and it is a design-led brand based in the predominantly north of the UK, but we are moving down, which is exciting. And yeah, it provides, co-working space, private offices, virtual meeting rooms, etc. Really, really focused on the service element. And I'm not just saying that either. It genuinely does focus on that customer service element as one of our values. And then we started Flexico a couple of years ago because we saw that there was a need in the market for more value space to provide kind of a no frills product, which is kind of the opposite of Wizu, but we saw that there was a need for both.
And just for context, the legacy brand Wizu and the operating structure, the deals that you've struck with landlords historically were primarily leases, and then you moved into management agreements.
Yeah.
And then, so when you say to serve a new type of demand with a value brand, was that demand coming from customers that you wanted to tap into, or is that coming from landlords who wanted to maybe spend less capex but plug the flex gap?
Yeah, exactly that. It came from landlords that were wanting to do something with problematic buildings. So we work with one particular company that has got many buildings across the UK. They were already operating as flex, but they really did not suit the Wizu brand. We wanted to help the landlord. We wanted to obviously grow our portfolio, but we couldn't put the Wizu brand on it. So that's why we created Flexico. So now all of our Flexico centres are managed centres that we operate on behalf of many different owners.
And prior to Wizu, we'll just cover really quickly some historical stuff. You were with Newflex for 12 years.
Yes.
That's a long time in this industry.
Yes, long.
And prior to that?
Prior to that, I was with Friend Castle Management, which was a property management company. And prior to that, I worked for MLS Business Centres, which if anybody's been in the game long enough, they'll know who they were. They were kind of Regis rivals at the time. So I found myself 2P'd from MLS to Friend Castle, and then 2P'd from Friend Castle to Citybase / Newflex. So I always used to joke when I worked at Newflex that I never actually interviewed to work for them. I just stayed with them for 12 years, but never actually applied for a job.
But kept growing in the company with your career, and now you're commercial director of this growing brand.
Yeah, no, I did. I was fortunate to have a lot of different opportunities at Newflex that definitely grew me. So very thankful for that.
I remember the way that structure was set up in that previous life. We had managers on site. We had salespeople in a local area, and then the salespeople would then report into you. You said that you are an introvert that loves sales, and I thought that was quite interesting. Can you elaborate on that for everyone?
Yeah, quite interesting and quite strange. It's really weird. I've just always found myself in the commercial part of a business. I did start in operations, so started kind of on reception and then subsequently kind of running the building operationally, but I just ended up in sales and had the opportunity, and well, I must be fairly good at it because I've stuck at it for this long. But yeah, I do always find it quite strange because you meet me and I am just not your out and out salesperson at all. But I think, I used to probably put myself down quite a bit for that reason. But I think what I've learned over the years is commercial kind of focus is probably quite different to the sales focus. Commercial is a bit more rounded. It requires somebody to maybe just take more of a step back and look at the overall picture to make a decision. And I'm very analytical, so that suits me really well. But also I read a lot that, a great salesperson is somebody who listens, and I am good at listening. Being an introvert, I much prefer listening than I do talking. So I think it's not an accident that I'm here.
There's another career that also requires being good at listening, and maybe there's a future for you in podcasting.
That's true. I mean, yeah, I won't do much talking, but definitely ask some questions and listen.
This is your first podcast.
It's my first ever podcast. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing this. Hopefully you're in your comfort zone here.
Yes.
So I want to jump in and get really deep on operational, practical things when it comes to sales, when it comes to making sure co-working actually works. Mm-hmm. You guys are growing to 30 sites by 2030. Mm-hmm. JLL had a 2030 stat a long time ago. Don't know if you remember that.
I do actually, vaguely.
Yeah, the Flex would grow to 30% of the overall office market by 2030. So we're still counting it down. When you're looking at a new building, a new opportunity, whether it's on a lease or a management agreement with a landlord, if you had to optimize for one thing, pricing power, occupancy, retention, ancillary revenue, or operating efficiency, which one would you sacrifice?
Please don't hate me, but probably ancillary revenue. Only because, and I do place importance on it, and I do think there's a need for it in flex space. But when you look at, what percentage of overall revenue it brings to the table, it's much, much less. The profitable part of the business is in the private offices, and I think it always will be. So that would be what I would say. Can I just make a point on retention? Retention for me is just the most important part of that list that you've just read out. I definitely have made the mistake in years gone by about pushing price. And if the customer won't pay that price, then that's fine. They'll need to leave and we'll bring someone else in. But I think I've learned that it is so much more profitable to keep your clients in your business. There's so many costs associated with letting them leave and then bringing in more new business. It's crazy. When I was kind of thinking about this particular point, it occurred to me that retention is kind of how you actually build your business. You can't have pricing power unless you've got retention, because there's absolutely no point in pushing your price if you're half empty.
No, it's 100% correct. And I think about the referrals that you don't get if that customer churns. It reminds me actually, when I first started in this business in 2007, in 2007, I was at a Regis location in Washington, D.C., and Regis had an entire bonus structure around pushing price up. They beat it into us that we had to churn and burn. We had to like churn that customer and try to get somebody else in. 90 days before the renewal's up, we're in there trying to push that price up. And I remember one client coming to me and said, you know, how much it's going to cost you to replace me? And I pushed that back to my area director, and the area director says, we got to hit the price. And it was such the wrong move.
Yeah.
And the client was right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trained in exactly that same way. And I suppose, to be fair to Regis, you know, their sales element of the business is a machine. You know, that they have got that much confidence that they will fill the space because they've just got absolutely well-polished sales machine. But I think it's just still so risky. And I remember the same kind of scenario, you know, in days gone by. I'd be going to speak to clients at their renewal and pushing their price up sometimes by like 50%. You know, with the toilets leaking round the back and the roof leaking and, you know, all sorts of different issues. It's just about knowing when you're in a position of strength and when you're not.
Cutting ancillary revenues, not always the choice you have to make. It adds a lot of value to a P&L. But what I want to talk about now is revenue quality and how to optimize for that revenue quality. So when you think about this is solid revenue, some people think of like a big deal, 50-person workstation. Other people think that it's a sticky client that's going to be there for, 3 or 4 years. What do you consider quality revenue?
Gosh, probably a bit of all of that. One thing that we have learned over the past couple of years is it's not always good to have that 50-person requirement move in, because when they move out, it's painful. You know, we're talking lots of sleepless nights. And, you know, more often than not, they're not moving out because they don't value what we do. They're moving out because we were always just a stopgap until they went to a lease or whatever it ended up being. So that is painful when that happens. So I would definitely say, we are at Wizu, we're catering our inventory more around the kind of 4 to 20 person office space, just because that's where the demand is for a start, but also it's just less risky. If one of them comes out, then it's much easier to backfill without any voids. So I would say that would be definitely our focus, and, you know, a long-term commitment, 24 months, probably not necessarily more than that, because then it does give you the option to push price at the end of that term. I would say, 24-month contract on a 15-person office, say, would make me very happy.
There we go. It's interesting to hear some consistency in some of the answers, because some of these questions I want to ask throughout the season to see what everybody says. And I expect some variance, but it's nice to see some consistency too. And I think it's also interesting to me because traditional real estate is quite the opposite of this kind of thinking, because they want the long-term contract. That's how they price their investment risk. And whereas here, it's better for us to have some flexibility and not get the big deal, because we want a more diverse customer base. So if somebody leaves, it doesn't really kill the business.
Yeah.
We don't have this huge void period.
And the problem is, as well, is, you know, we all know flex is hard at times, you know, especially with all of the competition out there. So we all know that if a 50-person requirement comes in and they want to move in, in a month's time, we're going to struggle to say no. So it takes a, pretty gutsy strategy to say no to that and hold out for, the smaller stuff. But I think in the long run, it probably does support the business that bit better.
And I reckon it's probably more sustainable as a business too, because often taking that bigger requirement, if you don't already have a fit out to accommodate that, now you're tearing down walls, and what does that do for the carbon? Does that mean that if you're focused on this specific type of customer target, are you avoiding certain sales channels because of that?
No, probably not. We focus very heavily on kind of direct lead sourcing at Wizu. So I'd say we're probably 50% of our leads we get from brokers and agents, and 50% we source ourselves.
You must have a lot of web traffic then.
Yeah, we do. And I would say certainly with that element, we do target those smaller requirements. With the brokers and agents, as we all know, we pretty much need to tell them that we've got everything available. Otherwise, they'll only send you, what they think that you've got. So we don't tend to be fussy with brokers, but certainly when we're doing our own direct sourcing, we'll source specifically for the space that we have available.
Al, what's your view on this?
That's part of the conversation that we had before. I'm curious about the type of leads that you're looking, or the type of customers that will be your ideal customers to fill in the spaces. Are you leaning more towards the larger enterprises or the smaller companies?
Definitely the smaller companies. Again, specifically when we're kind of, doing the Google ad search and things like that, the paid ads, we're focusing on the smaller businesses. We tend to get the enterprise clients from mainly commercial agents.
But are those enterprise clients? Because enterprise can be big deals, but they can also be small deals as well. So when you get the enterprise clients from the brokers and agents, are they bringing you the right size workstation, or are they bringing you the big stuff that you don't really want?
They're bringing us, a bit of both, really. And to be honest, it's something that we're having to adapt to at the moment, because we have still got space that is large. So, the most profitable thing for us to do right now is to fill it with somebody who needs that size space rather than split it up. So we're in a bit of a transition at the moment where we're trying to make sure that our inventory does match the smaller demand, but kind of on a bit of a phased approach. So we have still got some larger space that, would suit some of those enterprise clients.
I like the phased approach, actually. Often when we talk to a landlord that might have 60,000 square feet of space, they don't want to take the risk in spending CapEx to do a Cat B fit out for 60,000 square feet. So maybe we come into 30, and the other 30 could be marketed as a managed office solution and a traditional office solution. And whatever the market takes, you do it. But if the market doesn't take, and then the co-working private office, smaller offices really fills up, you just expand it into the footprint.
Yeah, exactly. So we've been looking at a lot of space recently and turned some of it away purely because, the floor plate is too big or it's too deep. We can't get those smaller offices built very easily. We really have noticed especially in Leeds, actually, where the competition that we're up against is not just flex, but it's managed. And that's when you mentioned managed there, Caleb, it made me think of this, because we're finding anything over 1,500 square feet, really, we're up against those managed solutions, which are essentially much cheaper than the overall service option. So we're competing against a much cheaper alternative. So, there is absolutely no point in us taking buildings that have got tons and tons of 1,500 plus square foot space to shift, because, we don't believe that we can do a good job for the landlord. There's absolutely no point in promising the world and under delivering. So that's our stance on it.
No, that makes sense. And that managed product has been growing massively, not just in Leeds, but across most cities around the world. Companies they outgrow the co-working environment, but they're not ready for signing 10 years. They need something in between. And that's the reality. I want to segue back to the word you said earlier about retention, because you made a big point around that. When it comes to retention, is there a specific aspect that you look at that works every single time? And the flip side of that question, is there something out there that's been talked about for retention that might be overstated?
So firstly, I've created a role specifically for somebody to focus on retention at Wizu. So we have somebody whose sole job is to basically look at retention stats, look at renewal increase stats, and meet with signature clients, make sure that overall renewal process is really top notch. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just, I do believe it's as simple as knowing your client. So I place a lot of importance on getting in front of the clients as much as we can, and kind of, not stalking them or anything like that, but just kind of just understanding how they're using the space. How often are they in? How many of them are in? What days are they in more? Are they attending our community events that we put on? Or are they keeping themselves to themselves? So we do place a lot of importance on that, so that we can kind of understand what we think they might do at renewal. And so I would say that that's probably the main thing that we would look at.
On the retention part, I'm wondering if there are flags that you can pick up along the way You mentioned like, are they participating in your community events or not? How often they're in the office? So is there like a system behind that, like a way to actually systemize it and catch those red flags as they come in?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few flags. So the first is, so we've invested in a piece of software that basically analyzes customer feedback. So it will send out surveys on a kind of rolling basis to our customer base, and then it will put, analysis together and give us some kind of top line stats on, how our clients are feeling. So that's the first thing is, we can kind of have a bit of a rag chart of where our clients are at. Second thing is, meeting with them at least quarterly and kind of really gleaning that key information. But I do think it is to do with how much they are engaging. Are they engaging with kind of the overall community, and are they using their space? More often than not, if somebody isn't in their office, or if they're coming in like once or twice a week, are they really going to renew in that sized space? Probably not. So, those would be the main flags.
And what is a healthy churn rate?
So for us, our retention rate, I would be happy with at 90%.
So 10% churn.
Yeah, I think that gives you obviously the option to bring in potentially higher paying clients on that 10%, but also, as I say, you've got that 90% platform on which to build.
And your core product, you mentioned earlier, Office. And do you have hot desking, dedicated desk, co-working memberships as well?
Yes.
Do you apply the same retention rates to those products?
No, not really. At the moment, I mean, you can tell from the way I answered the question earlier, my main focus is private offices. We probably don't place as much importance on the retention side of co-working because of the contract that people are on. It's a membership, isn't it? So well, for us anyway, it's a rolling membership. So they've got so much flexibility that I think it's quite difficult to, work out what you would want your retention to be.
Yeah, and I guess it's harder. It takes a lot more work to keep those people from churning because they can go on a monthly basis.
And I think it's much more difficult to control, I would say. So if we lose co-working members, it's often because, it was their business that was paying for the membership and maybe they've left that business. We get a lot of that. So it's quite difficult to control. I think what you can control more of is, who's coming in. So the actual sales process, I would say, is more controllable with the co-working side of things.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm starting to see operators that introduce commitment-based pricing to the co-working dedicated desk memberships, which is interesting.
Yep.
We'll see how that.
When you say commitment-based, you mean 12 months? Okay,
12 months.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see how that was going because I suppose I always put myself in the shoes of the client. And I'm not sure if I was, because there's so much competition out there, I'm not sure if I was given kind of a rolling membership from one provider versus a 12-month.
Depends on what the discount is, I guess.
On the price, doesn't it? But yeah, not sure. Be interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a good segue to community because, if the community is strong, right, then the person might lean into the community and that's what will drive their retention over time.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that is definitely right.
And look, community is a widely used word. It's become a cliche, and a lot of people say community and really don't mean it. The more you have, and my question to the likes of the managed office companies and to the likes of companies that focus on private offices, how important is community? So I'm a little bit biased about it. I think community is massively important, and I see some operators, not really doing community, and some not doing it at all, and some trying to really do it and getting it wrong, some trying to really do it and killing it and doing it right. So I would like to dive in a little bit deep on how Wizu looks at community. What works for you? What do your clients say? And how does that work operationally?
We do place a lot of importance on community. For us, it is everything, especially with all the competition that's out there. I mean, literally, I know what it's like in London, but, in day-to-day life for me in Leeds, there's a competitor on every street. So I think that's where you need to set yourselves apart. I think Wizu has done that really well. When we're when we're a founder-led business and the founders are still very much involved, I think that makes a huge difference because you've still got that great kind of culture that they started that, we're kind of carrying on for them. And that then flows into the on-site teams who then provide that brilliant service and create that community. So yeah, it's everything for us. And I think we do it really well. I think, you'd have to ask some of our clients, but I think we do it really well.
What do you think about what you guys do is what's doing it well?
I think it's to do with the teams that we have on site, the values that they have. Have they embraced our culture? Are they putting people first? Are they putting our clients first? Have they got that energy about them? So I think it starts with them, but then it's, more tangible things like, how many events are we putting on each week? Because that's really what a community is. It's people getting together, isn't it? And the only way that's going to happen is by putting on events and encouraging them to kind of engage with that. So I think we're pretty good at that. I think if anyone has visited the Leeming building in Leeds, they will properly kind of feel that community culture when they walk in. Does that answer your question?
It scratches the surface, yes. Yeah. And if you can bear with me, I want to keep going with it, if that's okay. So you talk about events, in which I think you're right. It's crucial to have events, give people the opportunity to come together and collide. It needs to be opportunities for people to do that sort of spontaneously, but also intentionally planned by the community team. But what kind of events are we talking?
So we're talking anything from kind of pop-up cocktail bar in the evening to we did a traitors quiz to, more kind of professional type stuff like, bringing Federation of Small Businesses in and getting them to do a bit of a speech and bringing in their kind of members, so we kind of have a bit of a variety.
Some fun, some mental stimulation, some networking, some growth. And where do you think community breaks? Like, I see operators try to scale community across their portfolio. Do you think that's possible? Can you connect the portfolio? Can you connect your network of locations, or is it a location by location basis?
I think you can. I think it's harder. I do think community links in with culture of a business. And I do think that culture is much harder to protect as you get bigger. It's something that we are really, really focused on. We've brought in a head of culture and engagement for that reason, because it's really hard to sustain. And I think, as I say, it ties in with community, because community ties in with your team and your team. So I see it as very much linked in that way.
Very symbiotic. Al made a good point earlier about community affecting churn rate. And if we kind of go back to that for a moment, if you've got a really strong community, everybody's vibing, they feel the culture, they align with the brand values, and they're there for a long time. Well, naturally, if they're in an office license agreement for, it could be 6 months, 12 months or longer. It's less likely they're going to churn. But then I go back to that whole applying the same principles to the products. And this is maybe a question or a challenge to you, I'm not sure. But does what Al said earlier, if you have this strong community, could it then impact in a positive way the churn rate and the retention rate for the co-working products? Yeah,
it definitely can. It definitely can. And I've seen, as I say, the Leeming building is an example of that. It's our most vibrant, busy co-working space in our network. I definitely do think bringing that community not only attracts more people in, but it definitely does kind of improve the longevity of the contract. I suppose what I will say on the other side is, again, so much competition out there offering very similar things. I don't personally think that community is going to be the one thing that makes somebody stay, but that's maybe just my view.
We'll give a shout out to Kat Johnson to weigh in on this one when we post this, and tag her in the comments and see what she thinks on that.
It'd be great to see.
So one of the things I love about our industry and the services that we provide as an industry, but individual brands, is we support companies throughout their life cycle. When their founding team just gets started and working at a kitchen table, they need a place to come together once a week or twice a week or meet people. We can support them. When they grow their team, they can get some hot desk and dedicated desk. They get to a private office. They end up going in a managed office, whatever. Over time, they grow. we can support all that growth. We can support them when they're coming down from that growth as well. The flexibility. I love that. In the early days where someone is not in the private office yet, but they still need to come in on a regular basis, we support them with day passes and meeting rooms. I appreciate the office is the core product, but to what extent do you think that the ancillary revenue from meeting rooms, day passes, not memberships, can affect the P&L and the EBITDA?
I mean, hugely. It definitely can. So don't get me wrong, my comment from earlier, it's not that it doesn't contribute. I just think the percentage that it contributes is much smaller.
Absolutely.
Offices, day passes, meeting rooms. I mean, when I first came to Wizu, I was extremely impressed with the meeting room revenue that they were achieving for a relatively small amount of centres. And you can see tangibly how much that adds to the bottom line when that's coming in consistently every month. I suppose, yeah, it's about that word consistent, isn't it? And making sure that, that doesn't reduce when it's not contracted. It's harder to predict how that's going to be. It definitely contributes to the EBITDA.
What percentage of occupancy do you need to get to in order to be break even?
Well, as in percentage of?
Office occupancy.
For us, 80%.
80%. And everything above that is just like pure margin.
Yeah. I mean, that's an average. So in some buildings it will be more because the cost base is higher, but yeah, roughly 80% occupancy is.
Can you be 90% occupied on offices and making a profit without like having ancillary revenue and day passes and co-working memberships? Which, if the answer is yes, when you add those things in, you're super profitable. Or the answer is no, 90% includes all this other stuff too.
So the answer is yes. We have got buildings that are 90% occupied without the ancillary revenue. It's a really difficult one because there's so many nuances to it. So if you make room for the co-working revenue, you've got to create space for that co-working to happen. So that's then taking away space from what could be private offices. I think it's just about being smart and really making sure that I don't personally think co-working areas should be huge. I think, we're talking in some of our buildings, we've just got a co-working area of say 500 square feet. And so I think you need to look at kind of where your target audience is, where you're located to kind of work out how much space you put for co-working. But yeah, we have got one or two buildings where we're 90% full and we haven't got co-working space and it's profitable.
What we're seeing, which is amazing. But back to the meeting room. So what we're seeing is that, and I'm curious what utilization rate you see on your meeting rooms when it comes, primarily from members' bookings. It's around 30%. Does that correlate with what you're seeing at Wizu?
So you're saying 30% of internal?
30% of the time the meeting room is utilized.
We're probably a bit more than that. I'd say last time I looked, 40%-ish. When you actually look at the stats, it's really low. And we have since I've joined Wizu, we have looked at all of our meeting room inventory and made sure that it's making enough money to warrant keeping. It's difficult because you need to have meeting rooms on site in order to attract more business and keep creating that community. But I think, for example, when I came to Wizu, we had some event spaces that were sitting in buildings that they just weren't being used. So in our Harrogate Centre, for example, it's probably about 1,200 square foot of space attributed to events space. And I mean, the utilization was like less than 10%. And so, we had to make the difficult decision to change that because it's just A, too big, and B, the utilization is just too small. Mm-hmm. So we changed that to a co-working space. So we moved the co-working space to that space, and then we converted some of the old co-working space into private offices, and then we kept some meeting rooms, but we did away with the event space because it didn't financially make any sense.
Yes, I think it's a challenge for every operator. You're right to say there's nuances. I think every brand has a different requirement
Yeah.
when it comes to attracting a different customer base. And those customers come with requirements. And ultimately, the space every square foot needs to make a certain amount of revenue on it. And you might say, some might say, well, I'm going to make a little bit less revenue in this area, and that's okay because I'm going to gain it over here. Like you might make less space in the cafe, but because you have a cafe, you can charge more on your desk rate, for instance. But ultimately, it's got to make some money. And the risk that we have is like, okay, well, how much square foot do we dedicate to meeting rooms? Because if I don't have meeting rooms, I'm not going to have office customers. But then if I lose my co-working space, then is my community going to die? Am I not getting enough events revenue because of a sales issue? Or is it because of a market issue? So you've got all these challenges, and it's you said earlier, flex is hard sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I'd say it's hard most of the times. You got to make difficult decisions, but I think that's what I love. I love looking at the data. Anyone who knows me will be like, yeah, Jo's quite boring when it comes to data. She just could quite happily just sit in front of the laptop and look at stats. But I think that's how you make your decisions. And it's how you make your difficult decisions is what is the data telling you.
And so when you're looking at the data, do you look at it weekly, monthly, and what are the top 3 metrics that you look at that you want to move the needle on?
Yeah. I mean, I look at it daily because I'm sad. I think, especially if you're in anything commercial, you need to be looking at stats daily. For me, it's as simple as number of leads, number of viewings, number of deals, and then, your conversion rates and, from a marketing point of view, your cost per lead and your cost per sale. That's kind of a daily observation for me, because I just think it tells you so many things. If there's something that's not working, it tells you which part of the sales process is broken, be able to fix normally pretty quickly. So I think it's as simple as that. Obviously, there's so many other KPIs that you can be looking at, but from a sales point of view, have you got enough leads coming in?
So it's really the top of the funnel is what you're constantly worried about. What keeps you up at night?
It is, yes, it is.
And then once you are able to get the lead in the door, what will be the conversion rate between towards one?
So tour to deal, we are at about 25%.
That's phenomenal.
I was quite impressed when I first came to Wizu. Yeah, because I was...
Usually it's like 10's average, right?
Yeah, I think obviously we haven't got a London presence yet. So I think that probably beefs up our...
Less competition?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because at New Flex, we were at sub 10%, but then we had many buildings in London, which doesn't help with that. So but I do think it's good. 25%.
Yeah.
Is pretty good. It gives you that confidence that if they come into your building, you've got a good chance of
1 in 4 will close.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably the lead to viewing part that's a bit more of a challenge, because that's obviously more telesales, as we all know. And you've got leads coming in from brokers, agents, and then direct is much easier to convert, as you would expect, but broker leads not so much, because maybe we won't go into that.
But you have half of your household is a former broker, right?
Yes. That is true. 50% is ex-office broker or FCO, as it is now.
So going back to the very top of the funnel there, you talked about lead to tour to deal, but what about web traffic to lead? Are you optimizing for that at all?
Yeah, we're looking at all of that. Yeah, so about 6 to 8 months ago, I took on the challenge of the marketing side of the business as well. So I'm still learning on that side of things. But yeah, for sure, we're constantly looking at the web traffic.
So when it comes to like the very top of the funnel, from website traffic to a lead or a booking, have you noticed any sort of patterns around where you can optimize to improve performance?
We are looking mainly at the user experience on the website at the moment. And so a lot of the rebrand and the new website was for that reason, obviously to make it more presentable, that bit more grown up. But then there are various different items on the website that we look at. So, a really silly example, but we were finding that the traffic from kind of PPC through to our website was really high, but then it was dropping off after that. So we just changed the color of the kind of call to action button on the website. which then improved lead flow again. So it's little things like that sometimes, but also live chat functionality as an example. So we outsourced that a couple of months ago and found, probably because we're a bit, we're maybe control freaks, we weren't enjoying kind of the responses that our potential clients were getting. So we wanted to bring that in-house. What we were finding was we were still getting leads come through, but they probably weren't as qualified as they should be. We've brought that back in-house, and we're managing that ourselves moving forward.
It's interesting, and you probably have maybe even some free advice here for on the UX side, because it's one of the things you guys are experts at.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm actually genuinely curious. What was the color before, and what did you change it to?
I think so. This is to do with the Flexico website. That was the example. So the color was just on brand. It was like blue, like the rest of the buttons, and we just changed it to orange.
Yeah, made it pop up more.
It was just, exactly. And then we did other things like, Emily, who is our commercial development manager for Flexico. On the old Flexico website, she would pop up and go, say, welcome to Flexo, how can I help you? And then on the new website, that wasn't happening. And then we put that back on, and again, we saw more leads come through. So sometimes it's just, playing around a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
100%. I mean, we are doing that like day in, day out, and we spend a lot of our focus and time on perfecting that exactly journey. On our side, we do it more for the ancillary, the meeting rooms, the day passes, the co-working membership. How do you capture the highest amount of traffic from visitors to one-time customers, from one-time customers to repeat customers? What we've learned, which is, might be a little bit different than how, you did it at Wizu, is that you can actually start using that website traffic going into ancillary products to become an acquisition channel to your membership products. Because what we started seeing is that once people are using your space once and then twice and so on, start to get familiar with the space, with the community, with everything, with the amenities, then they're starting to create routine around your location. And eventually it just makes so much more sense for them to become full-time members for all the benefits that it coming with.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Well, Eyal, what's one, if somebody had to make the most important UX change from a standard website to becoming highly optimized, what was the first thing you would tell them to focus on?
Yeah, so what we find out is that still a lot of operators are using their website more of an online catalog versus a digital store. And that's the most important transition that we are at least trying to push to operators, because traffic in 2026 coming to your website, right? They can transact on every other site that they are browsing to in the world, right? But for some reason, co-working are still using, their website as more like glorified PDF versus, a true Shopify or Amazon shop,
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we're used to buying things online on Amazon with 3 clicks. Or
Yeah.
I think I bought a tripod over here the other day. I clicked buy now, 1 click, boom, done. It's crazy.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You want to make it as easy as possible for somebody to buy from you, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's an investment, but yeah, we've got the ability for people to book their meeting rooms, their day passes, virtual offices all through the website. It's kind of an imperative.
Yeah, these days.
Yeah.
I think we covered a lot of ground. I appreciate you letting me go through a lot of these questions with you and challenge you in some cases.
Yep.
By the way, I'm not always right, as you know. You're probably right more than I am.
No, I doubt that. I don't mind being challenged at all.
I know, I remember. But you're good at challenging back. You ask good questions. And I think this has been a really good, fun conversation. This whole season long, we're trying to dive into the operational aspects and what makes co-working successful and profitable. And as you rightly said, there's a lot of nuance to that. So I think for now, thank you for tuning in. We're going to go to happy hour. And until next time, take care of yourself.